And so we come on to Halo 5, which is going to be the last video in the Halo series, or in this current Halo series, where I talk about the main Halo storyline that was started out in Halo Combat Evolved and bring it right up to date here with Halo 5 on the Xbox One. Now, this was the first Halo game exclusively designed for the Xbox One. I know that the Master Chief Collection had a revamped version of Halo 2, and that revamped version was the only one available on the Xbox One. But this was the first game that was built from the ground up. Like I've said previously, the remastered versions of games are taking elements, are taking the level design structure, so on and so forth, the story of the previous game, and updating it. What they did, as I said in my Halo 2 video, was on the Xbox One, on the remastered version, they added in cutscenes that actually tie into the events of this game, of Halo 5. So going into this, the expectation levels were again quite high. This is a exclusive debut on Microsoft's new console, and this one was a little bit more of an awkward game to gauge, even more so than Halo 4. Now, similar to Halo 2, you play as two different characters throughout the game. Here I'm playing as Spartan Locke, who has been assigned to go and find the Master Chief, who is not... he's kind of gone AWOL. But Master Chief is kind of following his own agenda, and that agenda is evolved through the storyline. When you get to play as the Master Chief, there will be footage in the video of that when it comes along. So straight away you got this sort of interesting dynamic of playing as two different Spartans, one that's going after the other. But the thing is with this game, and although I do like the game, I still think it's a good game. But this game perhaps got more criticism than previous Halo games, and there was a degree of justification from that. In the lead up to the release of this game, and even in a lot of the ads for this game, Microsoft really intimated that there would be a battle between these two Spartans, Locke, who is sent out to get him, and the Master Chief. Now, that seemed to be the core premise that they were trying to build on with this game. But actually, in truth, even though it's an ongoing issue in the story of the game, in the actual gameplay, it's, spoiler alert, very, very little of it is actually in the game itself, which was something that I found a bit disappointing. The game does have a decent story to it, but it's not quite what you were thinking. If you just went off the ads and the promotional material for this game, then you would be saying to yourself, hang on a minute, I thought we'd be doing different things in this. That isn't always a bad thing, but I do think the lesson has to be learned there of not to ever pay too much attention to advertising campaigns, promo campaigns and hype when it comes to video games, because marketing people that tend to be involved in all of this are always going to go at it from an angle of trying to make a product seem something that perhaps it really isn't. And although this is a Halo game, as you can see here, it's like Halo, it's got characters from Halo, it's set in the Halo universe. The main arc of the story that I think a lot of people were expecting this game to be representative of just isn't really there. And again, these videos aren't reviews, they aren't, so I'm not going to get into the realms of spoilers, I'm not going to go on about certain elements, but there are things that I do have to discuss in order to talk about the game. One of the big changes was the ability to aim down the sights on most, if not all, of the weapons in the game. As you know from previous Halo videos that I've done, and anybody that's played previous Halo games, originally there was perhaps only 1 or 2, maybe 3 weapons, depending on which ones they were in a game, that actually had the ability to aim down the sights with. The rest of them was what they were calling hip firing, just using the target reticule and firing. It was very old school. So Halo kind of has come almost fully into the more modern way of first-person shooters with this. And although you can still do your standard firing, you don't need to aim down the sights. It was interesting that they've kind of slowly evolved away from Halo Combat Evolved control system, and has now become more of the conventional, generic first-person shooter control system that one would expect to find in a modern-day first-person shooter. I guess it was inevitable this would happen, and it's not a massive deal. Like I say, you can still choose to shoot weapons however you want, but I think that it was inevitable that this type of thing was going to occur. Now, one of the most striking things about this game is just how fantastic it looks. It really is, for my opinion, the best looking Halo game, which one would expect considering it's debuting on the Xbox One. And I'm sure on the Xbox One X it's going to look even better, even more superb. And but is that the most important thing? No, of course it's not. The gameplay will always remain the most important thing, and by and large, for the most part, the gameplay feels intact as a Halo game, but with one major exception, and this is where I am going to have to go into a little bit of a spoilerific territory. In the game, you constantly end up in, not constantly, but you end up in reoccurring boss battles in the game. Now, I'm not going to say against who, because again, I don't want to offer too many spoilers, but this was something that it's notable in this. I mean, to say there weren't boss battles in previous Halo games would perhaps ignore maybe scenarios that you had. So, for example, in Halo 2, when you're jumping on the back of the huge Covenant walking machine thing, which name has just totally escaped me now. The Scarab. That's kind of a boss battle. You got to jump on this thing, you got to kill the things on board, and then once you've done that, you can power the thing down and destroy it. And there are also other fights against the Scarab in different Halo games, and that there are moments that one may describe as a choke point, where you get a lot of bad guys coming at you, or something. Whether it's the hunters, for example, they can be a boss battle of some description when you first come across them, because they are very, very difficult to kill, especially on higher difficulty levels. However, in this game, there is very, very clear boss battle moments, because you have to do the same thing, and this was what was kind of annoying about them. These happen regularly throughout the game, and you end up having to go about this as a boss battle, and this was where this game for me kind of let itself down. It felt very samey. Now, I'm not one of these people that dwells on the repetitive nature that some games have. I find it ludicrous that people can say a game is repetitive. The very nature of video games is repetition. It's doing the same task over and over again. One can look at any game and say that it's repetitive. But I think for me, what was telling with Halo 5 Guardians, to give it its full title, was these boss battles were repetitive. because it involved you doing the same thing each time to defeat the boss. And that really, it ground my gears, because I felt Halo is better than this. Like, I got the feeling that it's difficult to know what was in Bungie's mind at the time, to be honest. Not Bungie, my god, what am I saying? 343. There's a slip of the tongue there. But it's kind of difficult to know what was on their mind when they were thinking about this. I think they had an idea from a sort of story narrative point of view on how they saw this going, on how they felt this would actually work. And I can kind of see what they were going for, but it really didn't work, and it comes across like they didn't have ideas. And that's the problem. If you're going to put something in that perhaps you know is going to cause a bit of an issue with Halo players, because, or players in general, really, you have to be very careful that it works, and it doesn't really work in this. Is it enough to ruin the game? Well, it's in it enough for it to be consequential. I think it would be dishonest to say that, oh, it doesn't really matter that much, that it doesn't really affect the game that much. If you have repeat boss battles in a game, they're going to impact the game, and it does. And this is why this is a very difficult Halo to talk about, because on the one hand there are a lot of things it does really well that I really enjoy, and then on the other hand it kind of lets itself down. It's difficult to get away from this element of it, because it does impact the game. The game comes to a grinding halt while you have to do this, and I never felt that in other Halo games. I'm not saying that, like I said earlier, I'm not saying there weren't boss battles in other Halo games, but I never really felt that they were as big an issue as they are here, and that's telling. Now, a lot of reviewers at the time, a lot of gamers did point out these facts, did point out the fact that they felt that these boss battles felt shoehorned in. They felt like they were there to artificially sort of extend the lifespan of the game, and they may have a point there. I'm one of these people that, on the one hand, depending on the game length can be important, and other times it's not as important. I think you can't do it generally. I think it has to be within the context of the game that you're playing. I always like first-person shooters to be between 10 to 15 hours long. I think that's a fair, for the single-player campaign, I think that's a fair length of time. I think once you start going under that, you start running the risk of the single-player experience, which is the most important part for me, is being very much an afterthought. Now, some Call of Duty games, you get around the 8 to 10 hours, and okay, fair enough. I know Call of Duty games tend to be very much multiplayer-centric, but interestingly enough, when I played Call of Duty 2 and I did a full playthrough on the channel, I was actually surprised that wasn't a longer game. Sort of your memory plays tricks on you. But with this, I think if you did take out those boss battles, the game would be relatively shorter. I don't think I can argue with that. Others said that, have theorized that perhaps the reason why the campaign in this doesn't feel as fully developed perhaps as other Halo games is because that 343 got tied up trying to fix issues with the Master Chief Collection, I don't know whether there's any truth to that. I don't know whether 343 have ever come out, or Microsoft have ever come out and said, yeah, actually this is why. I would be surprised if they did, because they would be almost admitting that this is a compromised product. But I don't know, it sounds like it's a theory. To me, I think that companies tend to have different departments that they allocate resources to, and I would think that 343 would have had the resources to do both. I think it's more, to me, it's more likely to be an idea that they really wanted to make a game that looked amazing, that showcased what the Xbox One could do. They had to try to develop a story that continues the story that they started with Halo 4. And again, they encounter the same difficulties that they had with Halo 4, because this is the second part in a proposed new trilogy. And again, they're going to face the same issues that they had when they set out with Halo 4. How do you build on a series? How do you make it different but the same? It's a problem that so many things have. It's in many respects, funnily enough, it's a problem the new Star Wars movies have. How do you make them different but still feel like Star Wars? It's not as easy task as some people will make you think. I think you only have to look at the sort of criticism that The Force Awakens got was, oh, it's just a remake of A New Hope. And then you look at the criticism that The Last Jedi got, which was people were saying it doesn't feel like a Star Wars film. You can't win, essentially. You can't win. All you have to be able to try and do at the end of the day is make either a good film or a good game. I think if you try to get bogged down in trying to walk that line, you're gonna fall off it completely, and you're gonna please no one. So you have to just go with what makes a good game. And I think to a point 343 was doing that, but then they wanted to put something different in. And again, going back to these boss battles, because it's kind of hard to escape them, I think they tried too hard in that direction, and I would rather them have pulled back from that and just say, okay, there's things like you saw that just before, the sort of animated melee things, not too dissimilar to Doom 2016, obviously less gory though. I would rather them have just settled for things like that, but you can't blame them for trying. And I think that if you do that, then we're going to condemn video game companies to not being able to explore possibilities. Sometimes you make a game like a film and the ingredients are right, but it just doesn't come out quite right in the end. And that is kind of where I'm at with Halo 5. There's really is a lot of good stuff in here, and I hate not coming across as being very enthusiastic about it, because I love the Halo series, but there's just some elements of it that I can appreciate what they were trying to do, and I'm not going to go too harsh at them over that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean to say I have to like them. If you're going to be if I'm going to give my honest opinion on these things, sometimes even as much as I like the series, and then perhaps I am more forgiving of things that don't necessarily work too well, I have to be honest. And although I like Halo 5, it's just, there's something off with it. It's just not quite there. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a misstep for 343, because that would imply that it's a failure, and it's not. I don't know what goes on with the multiplayer. I dabbled in it briefly just to see what it was like, but I'm not a big multiplayer online person. But I'm sure it's doing well there. What was kind of interesting is I think they went down the path of what a lot of games are doing these days, which is introducing paid microtransactions, but then doing away with the idea of a season pass. I think that's what they did with this. As I say, I don't know because I didn't really get into that side of it. But the single player campaign, it's good, but it's not great. And I like my Halo single player campaigns to be great. So yeah, I mean, where do 343 go with this? I mean, I believe a Halo 6 is in the works, and I hope there is, because I don't think this is bad enough for them to say, "Oh, sack it." And I don't think, even if this was a really bad game, I don't honestly believe Microsoft would ditch arguably their certainly their flagship product. I don't think they would do that, and I'm pretty confident that Halo 6 will be a great game. I think this is just one of those. It's almost one of those Marmite moments. It's one of those divisive titles that come out from time to time, and I'm not one of these people that ever goes on. Well, I'd like to think I was one of these people that doesn't feel the need to go on these sorts of hysterical, borderline psychotic episodes, you know, that when people have to sort of be extremists, you know, "Oh, it's the best game ever," "No, it's the worst game ever," and then they start sort of trading insults at one another. I do try to maintain a balance with it. Most games, even games that people deride as being awful, I think that actually there's very few truly awful games out there, in all honesty. You know, for me, for the most part, I think that a lot of games do have good things in them. There are some truly awful games out there. I did a retro game in my previous video, Chase HQ on the Commodore 64. That is a truly awful game. But with games like this, I think that I always think that there are good things to take out of it. I mean, for this instance here, you're sort of going around in these sort of narrow, dark corridors. It's genuinely creepy. It's laden with atmosphere. Great use of lighting, great use of graphics, great use of sound, and it does it very, very well, I have to say. You know, it conveys atmosphere by the bucket load. If you compare this to when you were sort of creeping around the maintenance things in Halo Combat Evolved, this is clearly superior to those bits, but they were based on, you know, the original Xbox's capabilities, and here you can see going forward what the current generation of consoles are capable of. I really would actually like to see how this looks like on the Xbox One X. I'm sure it's amazing to look at, because it does look really good on a standard Xbox One. But yeah, I always try to find something in a game, even if it doesn't immediately engage with me, even if it's challenging to get into. I always like to think to myself, there are things in there that I like. So yeah, going forward, like I say, with the potential that is Halo 6, I really hope 343 knock it out of the park, and I'm confident that they will. I don't see there being any real reasons as to why they can't. You know, whenever, like I say, whenever you try to make a sequel to a series that has, like I say, trilogies are quite easy to do, because stories do have a beginning, middle, and an end, and therefore trilogies are just a simple expansion of that. But when you go beyond that, you almost have to do a new trilogy. That's truly where the challenge is. How do you expand beyond just those first three? You can't do that very easily without rubbing people up the wrong way. And I think that 343 have kind of been, a little bit unfortunate, I think, in that sense, that they've been the ones that have had to take the Halo series beyond Bungie's original trilogy. I mean, Bungie even did the prequel Halo Reach. So, 343 have been sort of like been said, right, here you go, here's Halo 4, and I'm sure they were all really excited. And then you sit down and you go, right, what are we going to do? What story can we tell here? And as I said in my Halo 4 video, it's a similar problem that Gears of War has got. You got, Cliff Bleszinski's original Gears trilogy. He had that in his mind. He had the roadmap in his mind about where things were going to go and how it was going to end. And he wasn't thinking about Gears 4 when he did Gears 3. Bungie weren't thinking about Halo 4 when they did Halo 3. It's why they did a prequel. Prequels are really much easier to do, because all you've got to do is unpick the story. You're just telling you're telling the story that you've already told through various games leading up to that point. All you've got to do is make sure that with the prequel you don't screw it up, but you've basically got the groundwork already done. But doing a sequel where you've got to take that story forward, that's far more challenging. And I think, I do think that 343 do deserve a lot of credit for how they've done this. And even though some of it's going to be challenging, I think, especially for Halo players like myself that played it from back in the day and have sort of grown playing the series, being there as each one has come out and experienced it from new, and then perhaps playing the Master Chief Collection and then playing this, which I do think actually is a really good way of doing it, because you can see the evolution. That does tend to make it, palatable's the wrong word, but perhaps more understandable in the direction that they were going with some stuff. But this is a good game. It's going to have things in it that might annoy you, and for me, as I've said extensively already, it was the reoccurring boss battles. That was the thing that did annoy me most of all. And as like I say, it's not something that I can just say, oh, that's it, because it is something that happens continuously throughout the game. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about Halo 5, and just tying up the series with this video. Obviously when Halo 6 comes out, I'll probably do a video about that, but to tie it up as where it is now, I do love this series of games. They no matter what complaints I may have had about this one, I still like it, and overall I still love this series of great games, just great first person shooters that, as I said back in my Halo Combat Evolved video, really showed that consoles could do large scale first person shooters, that they could do those sorts of more grand epic scale first person shooters that people back then felt was only possible on PC. And I was a PC gamer back in that era as well, so for me, it was a revelation, and it was one of the things that made me want an Xbox in the first place. Could you argue that had Halo not existed on the Xbox, would I have still wanted one? That's hard to say, because Halo didn't exist on Sony consoles, and I still wanted them. But it certainly played a big, big role. And I may have contradicted things I may have said in the first video saying that, but it did play a big role. It played a massive role in me wanting an Xbox console. As I say, I can't put my hand on my heart and say I would never have owned an Xbox console had it not been for Halo. That's a really sweeping statement to make. But it certainly played a massive, massive role. And again, you know, with the Xbox One, Halo, the thought of being able to play the Master Chief Collection, playing the remastered version of Halo 2 and finishing that was a really big draw to me wanting that console. Knowing that Halo 5 would be coming out for it. And you know, again, there were the Forza games, there were the Gears games, but it all plays a part. You know, if you take enough games out of a console library, it doesn't become as attractive. So that is always important, and Halo and the Xbox for me are always things that are very intrinsically linked together as to how I ended up getting a Microsoft console in the first place. And I don't regret it. I have no regrets about that at all. Microsoft can do some weird things at times, as can any company. They can make mistakes at times, as can any company. But overall, with this game, Gears, Forza, I do love playing on the Xbox, and I do love playing these games. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Thanks to those people that have managed to sit through 5 videos of me rambling away to myself in a vague manner. And I'll be back with other videos and other streams and God knows what else in the future. So thank you for watching.